wish to create a perfect human being, selecting the best organs from different corpses. Nosferatu, the medieval vampire in the remote regions of Transylvania.
5 innocent people killed, not a sign of a human.
It has been established that persons who have recently died have been returning to life and committing acts of murder. In all cases, the killers are eating the flesh of the people they murder. Victims show evidence of having been partially devoured by their murderers. The cruel can be killed by a shot in the head or a heavy blow to the skull. The cruel can be killed by a shot in the head or a heavy blow to the skull.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Answers to the Unknown. As you know, I'm your host, John. So, I'm going to kind of continue in with what we've been talking about. So, we've already covered when it comes to like cryptid creatures. We've covered the shapeshifter, the wendigo, and now we're going to be talking about the werewolf. So, I feel like this is going to be lumped into the pretty much the same category. How I look at it as most of these cryptids, like werewolves and stuff, could be considered shapeshifters. That could be their main category. They eventually break off into a bunch of different ones. So think of like different breeds of dogs. Alright, you have the main canine, and then you have all these different offshoots. I'm thinking it could be the same thing. So literally a shapeshifter could be considered a werewolf. A werewolf could be considered a shapeshifter. You know, the same thing with the other ones, with the wendigo and everything else. So that's just my own personal view on that. But we're going to jump into the book of answers here, and we're just going to jump through quite a few different tales, kind of like where the werewolf legend comes from. And believe it or not, it's surprising, it comes from all over the place. So let's see what the book has to say about them. Alright, werewolves. So werewolves, also known as lycanthropes, they are legendary shape-shifting humans. The shape that they choose to turn into is a wolf. Some variations change. Some of them, they turn into a legit, four-legged wolf that you'd see out in the woods. And in other legends, it's, human turns into one. It could be human turns into one during a full moon, or it's human turned into one whenever it chooses, or whatever. There's so many different lores, but they're all basically the same. So werewolf legends have sprung up pretty much independently and have spread, virtually everywhere on Earth. Literally, you can think of any spot on the planet and be like, I wonder about if they had new stories. Yeah, they have stories about werewolves. Might not be our version, it might be a little different, but either way, it's still clarifying the same thing, you know what I mean? So the werewolf tale is also one of the oldest. So I mean, this thing outdates Bigfoot, the Chupacabra, all the Jersey Devil, all the original like OGs of cryptids. This one right here is like number one. He basically started it all, so to say. I mean, it's things so old that we actually don't know where it's actually first documented, but we just know that it was documented way before any other cryptids ever were. So they're pretty common folklore, especially right in Europe. Huge folklore. There's werewolves out in Europe. Don't really know why. Europeans kind of have a lot of different ones. I think it's because they were so heavily church-based, and you got to remember, us as Americans, we were colonized by them. So before them, it was the Native Americans. So we have whatever Native American lore mixed in with every European lore, and now we have our modern day Americanized lores that we have. So it's all different, So where did the werewolf legend originate is what a lot of people want to know. And thanks to Vlad Tepes III, the Dracula myth has a source. We've heard of Vlad the Impaler. He's allegedly, Dracula. He is where Bram Stoker got his, ideas to when he wrote Dracula, was kind of based off of this dude and his castle and stuff like that. And for those of you who don't know, Vlad the Impaler was a pretty brutal dude. I mean, his whole castle was riddled with dead bodies that were impaled on spikes. So any enemy saw that, and maybe thought differently about trying to attack him. But, yeah, he was the original one for Dracula, though it's far from validated, really. I literally believe it's just where Bram Stoker got his ideas for the book. But no one can say, with certainty at what point in history, the werewolf was originated. Like I said, the origin of the werewolf's legend can only be guessed by what we have written down, from humans. It's really about all we got, guys. There's no solid proof like, oh, on this day, at this date, at this time, such and such became a werewolf, or a werewolf popped into our midst. We don't have any of that. So I don't, it is what it is, I wish we had more. I really did, but it's so hard to date back that far, especially when things were just either written down or not written down at all. It's hard to tell. And these things could have came back way before we even knew how to write and everything else. So their other name is lycanthrope. May also, be the point of this myth. So there's going to be a story that, I'm going to talk about with the whole lycanthrope and Lycoan, how that got its name. And I had actually mentioned it at one point during the Shapeshifter episode. I talked about it briefly. It had to do with Zeus. So, international lycanthrope legends. So this is just all throughout the earth. So throughout history, there are records of trials and, people who were had confessed, or they were being accused of being a werewolf, just like the witches. Just like Salem had their witch trials. These, there's werewolf trials. There's werewolf trials, werewolf hunts. There's a whole bunch of that, going on back then, which is just insane. But hey, whatever. I'm not too sure how that works, because if you really think about it, even their methods for the witch hunting was pretty just outlandish and made no sense at all. We're going to throw you in the water. If you sink and die, well, you're a human. If you float to the top, well, you're a witch, and then we kill you. So it's like you're kind of screwed either way when you think about it back then, which I think probably why in the end people were just like, yeah, whatever, I did it, because, really, if you think about it, you're kind of screwed no matter what you do at that point, So they were hunted, questioned, and executed in much the same way as the witches were, because witches were often accused of being lycanthropes because of the black magic. These so-called werewolf trials gave us a historical glimpse at rampant human belief in werewolves. Villagers arrested some of the accused because they needed basically someone to blame for the dead livestock, or some of the actions of more sinister crimes. So let's jump over to Greece. And the Greek origin of the lycanthrope has many different variations. One of the earliest and best known interactions is found with the Roman poet Ovid, and his poem Metamorphosis was published in 8 AD, so that's old as hell. And according to Ovid, King Lycaon, which is what I had mentioned in the Shapeshifter one, was the tyrant of Arcadia. One day Zeus came to Lycaon's palace, pretty much masqueraded himself as an ordinary man, after Zeus had revealed to them, like, hey, no, I'm not an ordinary dude, I'm actually the god, of, like, everything, I'm the shit. Basically, once he did that, King Lycaon was like, nah, dude, I don't believe you at all, like, no, like, you're not. No, seriously, I am, whatever, I don't believe you, we're gonna do a test. So, to test to see if Zeus was actually a god, King Lycaon had went and killed one of his hostages named Epirus, I don't know why I really need to know his name, boiled him down, roasted his skin, and tried to feed it to Zeus. Zeus didn't eat it. Zeus knew right out the gate that this was not normal meat. This is human meat. So he was like, no, I'm not eating that. So he got pissed. Zeus did. Lycoan got transformed into a wolf. So Zeus turned him into a wolf. Utterly enraged and somewhat disgusted, he set the king's palace on fire, killed his 50 sons with lightning bolts, and cursed the king and sent him off to the wilderness to live out the rest of his days as a wolf. So the English lycanthrope originated from the Greek word, really hang on here, lycanthropos, or wolfman. So derived from the king's name, Lycoan. So King Lycoan turned to a wolf, was lycanthrope. You can kind of see just where that goes and how that just goes down the line of, doing that. So, so the question is, why a wolf? Why did Zeus not turn him into something else? Maybe a mouse or something small, something puny and insignificant. Why a wolf? Well, it is thought by David Gallagher, and in his book he explains that it's because King Lycoan's savagery and lust for human flesh was identical to that of a wolf. So basically, how he went about that whole situation, he was just like, Zeus is like, nah, you know what? You want to act like a wolf and a wild dog? You're going to be a wild dog. And then, boom, turned him right into it. So, alright. So now we're going to jump over to ancient Rome. One of the earliest mentions of the werewolf, this is predating Greek lycanthropy, is in the Roman poet Virgil's Eclogue 8. So, and this one was written in 37 BCE. So, he wrote that a man named Moeris could change himself into a wolf by using herbs and poisons, and he also got the ability to call ghosts from their graves. So, that one right there, that little tale, so this is where I'm going to put this into, like, black magic. Alright, this feels to me more like some type of witchcraft, or could even be, more evil than that. It could lead into, like, the whole demon aspect, and just getting granted powers when you sell your soul, things like that. Because remember, you're really, in a way, you're selling your soul to the devil, but it's not the devil himself, Like, Lucifer doesn't do his own work. There's demons and they're his minions that do that, all that stuff. So they're the ones who you end up meeting with and making the deal and the pact and all that stuff. Lucifer's just like the head honcho. They just bring the paperwork to him and whatever, he approves and it's good. That's it. If you want to look at it in a businessy type of way. But for the most part, I feel like something like this is going to range into that right there. You're asking for it. You're looking for it. You're pursuing it. And, yeah, that's the only way you can get things like that, because I've honestly never heard about werewolves being able to summon spirits, To me, that just seems like, no, you're trying to go further with this whole thing. So you're turning yourself to a wolf, and you're also going to be able to talk to spirits, which could lead to whatever craziness, but that's how I look at it, that's how I see it, and yeah, that's... To each their own, like I always say, but, tampering with the dark arts, it's some pretty heavy stuff, man. So, another early instance of werewolfism is the satirical novel Satiricon, which Roman courtier and novelist Gaius Petronius wrote it in the 1st century. So he wrote this in the 1st century, and he said it's narrated by a servant named Nicaros, and this is pretty much what he said. So, one day he was on a walk with his host when he came upon a graveyard. The host suddenly took off his clothes, urinated around them in a circle, and transformed into a wolf. Immediately after, the host, now a wolf, ran off to the countryside toward a flock of grazing sheep. Nicaros could hardly believe his own eyes until a sheep owner said to him that his servant had injured a wolf with a pitchfork. The next day, Nicaros noticed a wound on the neck of his host, and this wound mark on his neck was in the exact position where the pitchfork had injured the wolf. So right there, that's pretty nuts. So imagine, you seeing somebody do that. Maybe that blew your mind so much you thought, like, nah, there's just no way, like, this must have been a dream. Maybe it happened around a weird time where you were maybe semi-sleeping, supposed to be sleeping, but either way, that happens, and someone says, oh, man, yeah, there's just a huge wolf in my field, man, and I stabbed it, right in the neck, and you're like, oh, man, that's crazy, and then the next day you wake up, and you look at your buddy, who's your host, or whatever, he's in human form, but you notice on the neck, there's a wound where, like, he would have gotten pitchforked, and it's like, wait a minute, like, what I mean? It's kind of weird, but you can see where that could make you start wondering, okay, there's got to be something, something more to that situation. So in the Roman version of the Lycaon story, Jupiter takes place of Zeus, which is not surprising considering the are basically the same people. Zeus is the father of all the gods, and that's an ancient Greek religion, as to where Jupiter in the Roman mythology is the king of all the gods. So Zeus is the father, Jupiter's the king. Basically the same thing. We all know it. Men, you know it too. You're the king of the castle. You're the one who... That's it. So no matter what, it's the same thing. Alright, let's go over to Norway and Iceland. So despite being 1,472 kilometers apart, Norway and Iceland share a very common mythology known as Norse mythology. So the Norse, we all know them Vikings and all that. Their religion is actually really good too. I've actually studied some of their religion, and I've used some of their stuff and some of their practices in my own, my own doings. If I've ever had to help you out, or you've, seen some of the stuff that I've done, you've seen me use some of their symbolisms, some of their wording, some of their rituals. I've used those to help in certain situations. I love it. I think it's great. It's great. Knowing a bunch of different religions, I mean, there's definitely some where I'm like, it's just, I don't know, man, it's just kind of weird and iffy, but I just think back at, like, the really solid ones, and, yeah, like, those are the ones I try to go for. They make a lot of sense. So, yeah. So, the reason that the Norse people pretty much colonized in Iceland during the Viking Age, basically like anything else, they want to find a new place, kind of spread their roots around and discover more. And just like any time that happens, one culture has their own beliefs, and when they go to a certain place, that will end up being left behind too. They'll stick with wherever they were. And it's, like I said, same thing happened here. We have the Eastern Europeans that came over with the Catholicism and Christianity, which is why we still have that going on today here, as well as other religions that we've had, from other cultures that have come over here. So the more cultural mix that you get, you're going to get more of the mixed religions, mixed legends and stories, and realizing sometimes that, oh man, it's literally the same thing that we have. Yours is just, yours is just named different, and like maybe the start of it would, turned out differently, but same thing. And I'll actually mention that in one of these here. So at the time of the colonization, their Assyrian religion left elements of Norse mythology in Iceland literature. So the Norse mythology is composed of sagas. It's like kind of little mini stories. So when it comes to werewolfism and Volsunga saga from the 13th century particularly, that one stands apart. Werewolf-related stories have, pretty much prominent Preska in this saga. They have a prominent presence in this saga. The most famous werewolf story in the Volsunga saga is about a father and a son, Sigmund and Sinfjotli. So while wandering in the woods, Sigmund and his son came upon a hut, and in that hut were these two spellbound wolf pelts. So if you put the pelts on, either pelt will turn the man into a wolf, and the person will possess the power, the cunningness, and the valor of wolves. But once on, the pelt can only be removed on the 10th day. So 10 days you got to deal with being a wolf if you find these pelts and you put them on. Having put on the pelts, Sigmund and his son turned into wolves and began wandering about the forest together. Before they split up, they agree to howl at each other if they come across, any group of men who may try to hurt and harm them. And that was their thing. Like, you come across a group of people, call out. Either you'll come to me, I'll come to you, whatever, and we can now together fight off what we have to. Well, his son didn't listen. So his son ended up killing 11 men at one time because he got surrounded by them. And Sigmund got extremely mad and injured his son to the point of death. He was basically on his deathbed. So now the father's feeling kind of bad, but as he's feeling bad, a raven comes in. And as people know in like the Norse mythology, the raven, represents Odin and brings him a healing leaf and puts it on the son. Boom, just like that, the son becomes healed from his injury. Him and his father take off the enchanted wolf pelts come the 10th day, and they immediately burned them in the ashes so that they could free themselves from the curse of whatever was going on. Did that work? I'm thinking it did. I'm thinking, once again, it's a cursed object, just like any other cursed object. You could pretty much rid it by burning it like that. Salt and burning is like a purification type thing, and it works in many different situations. I've done it before with certain things, and it's totally worked. It's just, you got to be strong when doing it, because things, like anything, can always backfire. You can piss something off that you're trying to get rid of. So always just remember that in the back of your head. Be careful with what you're doing, and before you do it, just really, really, really make sure you know what you're doing, because I'd hate to have anything bad happen to anybody. So now we're going to go to South America. And this one right here is the Lewison. So also written as El Lobizon or Lobizon, is a South American werewolf. So the myth of the Lewison mainly prevails in Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. It stems from the Portuguese belief that the seventh son of the family of all boys will turn into a Lewison on the night of a full moon, especially if it fell on a Friday. I don't know why that makes any difference, whether it comes on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. I'm just thinking, Friday, I guess that makes for a fun weekend. So, whatever. I guess we're turning into werewolves on Friday. So the myth is especially prevailing in Argentina. It's so well known and so believed in Argentina that even the Argentinian president, Juan Domingo Perón, strongly believes in the myth. And that's one thing you've heard me say a bunch of times is credibility. I like people with credibility. Cops, doctors, lawyers, judges, people of higher powers and authority, they really, congressmen, all that, they don't really say things like that. Like, you don't ever see them admitting things like that, because either one, they're nervous, or they just hadn't seen anything. But if they did, I highly doubt they're going to step forward, just because it could really ruin them, and that's why when you do find out that people like that are stepping forward going like, no, I don't care what anybody says, I know what I saw, that is what I saw. Like, it crazy, there's no way in hell that, that should have ever been around or ever happened. That right there to me makes me go, okay, I believe that more than Jim Bob, who just showed up with no teeth, a Coors Light t-shirt on while drinking the Coors Light, going, yeah, man, I've seen that thing, like, oh god, like, I get it, but also, like, holy hell, I'm pretty sure they've seen something, I'm pretty sure they have, but a lot of the times I feel like they pick the most non-believable person to be like, we're gonna interview you, instead of like, no, but that dude over there saw it too, and he's a lawyer and open to talk about it. Nah, we're gonna go with this guy. It's like, whatever. So anytime anything like that happens where you have somebody of that type of authority who does believe in this, who does admit that they've seen, that they do admit to believing. I like that. I find that really good, credible evidence. So the origin of the Lewisan legend is a Guarani mythology. So the Guarani are the indigenous people to Paraguay. Their mythology stated that there were 7 monsters, and out of the 7 monsters, the last one, known as the Lewisan, had a horrendous appearance, but had no apparent resemblance with a wolf at all, and became known as the god of death. When the Europeans colonized South America, the Lewisan association with death began to wane over time. The Lewisan myth eventually mixed with the European werewolf legends. The Leviathan morphed into a half man and half wolf. That's how that happened. And now we're going to go to Mexico. Alright, so werewolves in Mexico. They are known as the Nahual or the Nagual, but both are pronounced Nawal. So, spelt no way near close to how that's pronounced. So even though Mexico was a Spanish colony for 300 years, the Nawal myth did not commingle with the European legend of the werewolf at all. The tale remains in its own original form to this day, and the belief in Mexican werewolfism or Nawalism varies from region to region, and it's kind of just like out in the U.S. and things like that too. A lot of things vary from spot to spot. Some Mesoamerican Indians believe that the Nawal is the guardian spirit that resides in all animals, such as deer, jaguar, eagle, bobcat, mountain lion, and so on. In other regions, they're a more ominous version of Nawalism. It is believed that powerful men, can transform themselves into an animal to cause harm to other people. A relationship exists between the letter belief and the word Nawal, which originated from the word Nawali, meaning disguise. The name pertains to the sorcery by which magicians could change your physical forms into that of an animal. So once again, same thing, but just kind of dark magic-y type stuff. I feel like you could possibly get bit by a werewolf and turn into a werewolf. But I think it's more of a curse. Somebody's gonna put that on you, or it's in your bloodline. Like, for some reason, if it's that old, it literally could be just a creature who is that old, and because it was able to breed with humans, maybe it's been able to, keep going, expanding itself out there. So, you don't even know. Maybe it's like some type of hidden thing you don't have. Who knows? Maybe some people do know, but it's crazy. They could literally be living among us, and you'd have no idea. It could be your neighbor. It could be your neighbor Bob, for all you know. So, the legend of we're gonna actually go back up real quick. North America, that's where we're at. We're gonna jump into North America. So, perhaps no other country has played more of an influential role than the United States, which is true. Between Hollywood, all our movies and everything else, we've totally been big into the whole werewolf stuff. So, pretty much propagating the werewolf phenomena has been like one of our biggest things since, I want to say, like the early 80s. You know what I mean? Like, those movies are really starting to kick off. Like, we had like Wolfman and all that stuff. I think it was like way back in the day, but really around the 80s, man, is when like that stuff really started coming in, into effect. And among horror fans, it was really, really a big thing, especially in like the pop culture and all that, and it still is now. But I can tell you what, we do have someone to thank. We can thank makeup artist Rick Baker, who's provided some of the most realistic werewolf transformations like ever depicted on screen. I mean, they're getting better now with like the CGI, but I mean, this dude did it with no CGI. Like, it was all him, makeup, and whatever other stuff that they do. But this dude right here, I mean, was phenomenal. So he did work in The Howling, An American Werewolf in London, Michael Jackson's Thriller, and there's other things that he did too. But dude, I mean, those right there, those are all like good films that had some pretty good makeup done to them, you know. So the legend of the werewolf in America mainly comes from the European settlers, like I've said. You know, anything had come from over there. When these pioneers began settling in North America, they noticed a considerable wolf population. And wolves back then were big. I mean, they're still big now, but like they were pretty big back then. A lot of things are big. We were also a lot smaller too. So we didn't have many 6 foot tall people running around, which is, I consider, almost like average now. You know, I mean, my height used to be kind of average a few years back. I'm like 5'8", 5'9", but it's like 6 foot seems to be like the average height for men. And but back then it was like 5 feet tops, maybe 4 and some change. So they're small. We were very small. And that right there sparked a lot of stories too with them. Their whole werewolf thing, you know, the size of the wolves. Wolves are big and they're mean. I don't know if you ever seen, like, just Google wolves, like, growling and snarling and stuff. And you see the teeth on these things. They're ridiculous. They're not like your dog's teeth, which are tiny compared to a wild wolf, alright? And things are no joke. So, when their legends mixed in with the Native American werewolf legends, which were already in existence because they were here first, the Europeans, you know, all mixed in their stuff together, and then boom, we have our Americanized version of the werewolf. You know, that's kind of where that came in. So now we have the French influence, which typically the French, you know, werewolf or loup-garou has human reasoning within it. Hence, it attempts to free itself from the lycanthropic curse. So theirs is, instead of embracing it or pretty much being like, man, I don't know, I guess I'm stuck like this now, they tried whatever they could to prevent it from happening. Or if it did happen to them, they tried everything to, you know, rid themselves of that curse instead of continuing on with it. You know what I mean? They didn't just make amends with it. They're like, no way. Like, I'm not living the rest of my life like this at all. So they were trying to get out of it, which is understandable. So let's see here. It was placed under the curse by someone of witchcraft. So that's pretty much what they believe, that you got this because maybe you pissed off somebody who was a witch and now they wanted to curse you. So boom, that's what they did. They cursed you with this whole werewolf disorder. Whereas in, like, the Wendigo, which is a werewolf-like creature in Native American folklore, is more characterized by evil, cannibalism. Like I had mentioned that, you know, in the Wendigo episode. So as these two creatures, you know, characteristics combined, we found a new kind of loup-garou legend still present in Canada and the upper and lower peninsulas of Michigan and upstate New York. All these places, you know, once being French colonies. There is something else that we should discuss regarding the American lycanthrope. So, and for you guys out there who watch the show Supernatural, who've been big fans of that, just listen to this real quick. When I'm talking about this French werewolf, the loup-garou, it sounds very familiar, right? Loup-garou. Well, that's because it's very similar to rougarou, which is basically the same thing. Rougarou is a werewolf, and I'm planning on diving into that lore in further episodes. But the rougarou is a commonly described as a bayou-dwelling werewolf. It appears in Louisiana folklore a lot. The legend of the rougarou is common as French Louisiana, as also once in a French colony. So the rougarou is basically a werewolf. But it has different things. So the Rougarou has been known to be able to throw voices out. So say it hears us out in the woods. Maybe it focuses on me. Here's my voice. Here's your voice. So then something happens where it'll make us kind of panic, and then we kind of run, and we end up splitting up somehow, even though we're not supposed to. We split up, and now we're trying to find each other. I start hearing you call my name, so I run over there to try to find it, even though you're over here, and you don't even hear that going on because you're calling me over here, but I'm hearing your name coming from over here. So now I go over there to go check it out and see what's going on, and then boom, I get taken by the Rougarou. But then now he will throw my voice at you, so you hear me and try to come over, and then he gets you to it. That's just how it works, you know what I mean? And from what I heard, at that point, you're just dead. You don't turn into one, but it's basically the same thing, just different names. So this one right here, the next one's very interesting. So this one's over in Germany. So we all know about the Grimm fairy tales. It is not the little red cap, Little Red Riding Hood. That includes werewolfism, but instead it's another tale. So we think that in the Grimm lore it's just the Little Red Riding Hood tale, but it's not. There's actually this one. So here's the story. So a soldier stated this story happened to his grandfather. So his grandfather went into the forest to cut wood with a friend and a third man. But there was something strange about that third man. But the grandfather couldn't tell for sure what it was. So after they had, done their job, they had become very tired. So the third man recommended, they lay down and take a nap. So accordingly, the three men lay down, on the ground and closed their eyes. The grandfather pretended to sleep, but he was not. He kept one eye slightly open so he could watch the third man. He was keen to find the reason behind the third man's strange behavior. The third man looked to see if the other two men were sleeping. After feeling confident they both were asleep, he either put on or took off a belt and became a wolf. But he didn't resemble like the natural, looking wolf that we see out today. No, it was more like human-y, just odd, almost like a wolf on all fours, but then it could just stand up like a human. It was weird. So he quickly ran off to the nearby field where he ambushed a pregnant female horse and devoured it completely. So just ate this whole horse. The man came back, either took off or put on his belt. It doesn't say which one he did for sure. And he lay down again in human form right near the others and took a nap. Later on, they woke up. They started hiking back down to town. Once they started getting basically into town, the third man was complaining about having a stomachache. As they entered the town gate, the grandfather whispered into the man's ear, "Well, when one devours a horse..." But before he could finish his sentence, the third man interrupted him, stared at him with this stare of just, "What did you just say?" He literally just looked at his grandfather and said, "Had you said this to me in the forest, you would not be saying this now." Basically saying, if you'd questioned me about that, out there in the wilderness, dude, I would have just ate you. You would have been next on the list. I would have killed you, because you now know my secret, and I can't have that. You gotta die, So that's how that would have went down. So the story published in the second half of the 19th century, it is one of the oldest and most popular legends of the werewolf in Germany. Werewolfism in Grimm's fairy tales is not solely responsible for the Germanic lycanthropy, but fairy tales aside, a documented gruesome execution of a real-life werewolf in Germany has existed for 425 years. And that is the story of Peter Stump. So Peter Stump, also written as Peter Stubby or Stubby Peter, he was the werewolf of Bedburg. Executed on October 31st, 1589, which is Halloween. They charged him with witchery, rape, murder, cannibalism, incest, and livestock mutilation. After becoming apprehended and fearing pretty much torturous execution, Stump confessed to all the crimes he committed over the past 25 years. He further admitted that Satan gave him a griddle in which he could transform, himself into a wolf when he pleased. When asked about the griddle, he said that he had hid it in the valley prior to his apprehension. When the magistrate sent people to retrieve it, they returned empty-handed and reported there was no griddle to be found. So, who knows that story? Because that's where it ends. Beats me. So France, we're going to go over to France now. They has previously discussed French call the lycanthrope the loup-garou. Its origin is unknown, but from our investigation, we can say that all of France was plagued by a lycanthropic terror in the 16th century. From the 16th century until the first quarter of the 17th century, the French killed more than 30,000 people. They're pretty much suspected of werewolfism. It's a lot of people. So in 1521, Pierre Berget and Michael Verdun were executed as werewolves. Historical records indicate that they were basically a serial killer team. In 1573, Gilles Garner, otherwise known as the Werewolf of Dole, was executed for being a werewolf. He was a confessed serial killer. After further research into the loup-garou, we found the following two events that predate this widespread werewolf terror in the land. So these events confirm that the lycanthropic phenomena was alive and well in France long before the 16th century. In 1198, Mary de France wrote Bisclaveret, in which she tells the story of a helpless baron who becomes trapped in wolfism, in wolfish form because of his wife's treachery. In the earliest documented instance of French lycanthropy is in 1214. In a report that says Gervais of Tilbury told Emperor Otto V that people in Auvergne, France, were observed transforming into wolves during a full moon. Imagine seeing that shit. I'm just like going through a town and all of a sudden it's like just this big field and you're like, what the hell are all these people doing out in the field? And the clouds come away, moon comes out, they start ripping clothes off and just changing into these like wolf-like creatures. Imagine seeing that shit at night. It's crazy. Ireland. Good old Ireland. So, here's a werewolf story from the 12th century Irish folklore. A priest, accompanied by a boy, was traveling from Ulster to Meath one night in the woods. A wolf approached the priest. As it came closer, it began to speak of God. The priest became terrified and couldn't believe what he was seeing or hearing. The trembling priest asked the wolf what kind of creature was he that had the shape of a wolf but the words of a man. The wolf told the priest there was only one other creature like him, and it was his wife. They were the native people of Ossory, cursed by a saint named Natalis for some ancient sin. The curse compelled two Ossory people, a man and a woman, to take the wolf form and remain in the form every 7 years. After that period, two new people would take their place, and the prior two would return to human form. The wolf told the priest that his wife was very sick and dying. He was there to seek the priest's help in his wife's absolution. Yeah. After all, they are, just ordinary human beings under wolf skin. Baffled and still terrified, the priest reluctantly followed the wolf. When they came near to the ailing wolf that was on the ground, it thanked the priest and agreed to administer a viticum, which is, I'm guessing, is like a type of medicine to make feel better. But sensing hesitation in the priest, and to assure him that he wouldn't commit blasphemy by giving the dying wolf viticum, the male wolf peeled the skin of the ailing companion from head to belly, and pretty much revealed an elderly woman laying inside. Imagine seeing that. That's just crazy. So the priest gave her the Vitacum, and then upon concluding, that the Vitacum, the male wolf rolled the skin back over his wife's body, and the two of them got up and continued their time in the wolf form until it came to an end. Nobody knows about it. That's the only last record of it, so I'm guessing after all that time, they made it past and two other people came in. The one thing that gets me is that this was actually recorded as a fact, and what is unique about this story is that it is recorded as an instance rather than a mere myth. So it became indexed in the Topographia Hibernica, treatise on Irish geography and folklore. Gerard de Barry, or Gerald of Wales, wrote the treatise towards the end of the 12th century, around 1188. So now we're going to jump into Eastern Europe and Slavic countries. So interestingly, the vampire and werewolf myth is closely related subject in Eastern European countries such as Romania, Czech Republic, Slavic countries. So, and Siberia, Croatia, place like that. So they give a bunch of different names here. I'm gonna try to pronounce them, but it's Vlkodlak, which is Slavic. I'm guessing this is Vlkodlak, which is Czech. Vlkoslek, which is Siberian, and Vrykolakas, which is Greece. But all of those refer to either a werewolf or a vampire. Etymologically, the word that gets me all the time, they all mean wolf's fur or wolf hair, so that's basically what all that means. All these words originated from the Indo-European language. The werewolf and the vampire myth developed simultaneously in these regions and basically share very strong linguistic kinship. So those are the 10 legends that pretty much brought this whole mythical shapeshifter to life. This is where it all is, and like I said, guys, everywhere out here has its own tale, has its own story, has its own sightings of these things, different names, maybe different starts, but for the most part it's the same thing. And I think to this day it's like Dogman. I feel like Dogman could possibly be the same thing. Dogman is, I want to say, going in with the whole shapeshifter thing. It could possibly be werewolf. Maybe it's a werewolf that doesn't change. As we know, we can have that. We can have the ones that can't go back into human form. Maybe they stopped using the original wolf, shape. Who knows? We really have no idea. We like to think we know, but we never will. It's just always interesting. Love the whole werewolf aspect. People have used it too. Like, just the moon definitely gives off a lot of power. So I could totally understand where it changes someone's attitude. Maybe a full moon comes about and that person just seems more angry, more just vulgar, animalistic, maybe just edgy. We have no idea. Like I said, we can try to study all we want, but until we actually can find, capture, we're gonna have no idea. But yeah, that was Werewolves, guys. So hope you enjoyed that. So that's all I got for this week, guys. Hope you really enjoyed this episode. I know I definitely enjoyed doing research on this one. Love the cryptids as much as the paranormal, just because I feel like that is something else that came from somewhere. People saw something that made these stories happen. So I'd love to find out the truth behind all of it. So until next week, folks, have a good one.